One of the more interesting guests we've had on recently in the show is Alex Epstein. He's the president of the I want to get this right, the Center for Industrial Progress. He's based in LA, but today he's in Calgary giving speeches on turning carbon haters into carbon lovers. Alex, is it even possible to turn environmentalists into people who love industrial progress?
Yeah, absolutely. But if by environmentalists you mean people who really care about environmental issues but have been taken in by the anti-industrial leaders, I certainly have failed in my attempt to convert Bill McKibben, for example, and it wasn't really an attempt. I mean, I've pointed out a lot of things to him, and he, the day after I tried, he went to, I believe he actually went to LA to try to convince everyone to get rid of 95% of the fossil fuels that sustain our civilization. So, but if you pick the right targets who really have the right values, you can certainly do a lot.
You know, I think I know what you're talking about. In my own book, Ethical Oil, I say you're never going to convince the paid professionals at Greenpeace, but the people I call the Zoes, you know, the university students who are maybe a little idealistic and want to do the right thing and have just been misled, but are generally actually good faith people. There is a chance to convince them, but it's tough, right? Because, I mean, they've been soaking in this sauce, this left-wing anti-industrial sauce since grade school, and you've maybe got like a 30-second elevator ride to turn them around or a 5-minute altercation at a protest. It's tough. Have you ever actually turned someone around? Or maybe does it take a long time and you plant the seed and only a year later do they realize that you were right?
Well, I mean, a general idea in communications is that you need multiple exposures. So that's part of the job of a communicator or an organization to get people into a system where they get repeat exposure. So, for example, anyone watching this, go to industrialprogress.com, subscribe to our newsletter, and after a year, you know, if you have one outlook, you might have another. But the other aspect is it's really important to figure out what's the choke point, what's the real obstacle. And your book, Ethical Oil, actually indicates it. It's that the industry is viewed as immoral. But it's important to realize what's viewed as immoral. People don't think it's immoral because they don't do enough community service or don't have enough sustainability initiatives. And that's what the oil industry thinks is a problem. That's why they brag about helping with AIDS, as if they're AIDS charities. No, the problem is that the core of the industry is viewed as immoral, that it's wrong to drill into the ground, that it's wrong to burn oil. And at CIP, that's really what we focus on. It's better to have the oil and use it to improve human life than to leave it in the ground doing nothing. And any byproducts pale in comparison to the value of the product. So the people producing this are highly, highly ethical.
You know, that's a great point. I used to hear people saying, well, you know, maybe some kind of oil is better than the other, but it's all evil. So you're saying just choose oil that's the lesser evil. I make a point of saying, no, I do not accept that oil is evil. Oil is what allows us to move around using machines instead of our own legs or animals. It allows us to stay warm in the winter, cool in the summer. That's not evil. That's the number one reason our lives are comfortable and longer than they were in the nasty past. But how do you break through? How do you show people that oil and energy and mining is moral? Do you use examples like, well, that cell phone in your hand, that polyester coat you're wearing? Like what examples do you use to pierce through people and say, listen, mister, your whole life is depending on fossil fuels? How do you break through in that first case?
Well, this is a topic I've been discussing all week with different people in the oil industry, and tomorrow I'm fortunate enough to speak at the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, which is the largest oil organization in Canada. And one aspect is how to tell the story right in a personal way that people will really come to value oil. And I call this the need, challenge, triumph narrative. So you have to talk about how we have this basic need for both portable power and modern materials, how this is a great challenge that, for example, the solar and wind industries have failed miserably to do. Nothing against them, but they are failures. And that the oil industry, unique among all others, has met the challenge and has triumphed so that I can get a FedEx package in a day, so that I can have a hospital that's been sanitized by oil products, so that the whole world can be fed. You know, the oil industry has basically solved world hunger thanks to modern agriculture, and people need to be told that story. And if they are told that story, they'll come to value oil just like they value their iPhone, and they'll come to value the people who produce it. And ultimately, I find a lot of people start regarding the oil industry as heroic, which I do myself.
I do too. You know, I think there's some people even in Calgary where you are now, if they're asked at a dinner party, what do you do for a living? They're shy about saying I'm an oil man, because even in Calgary, people have become conditioned to think, oh, oil is immoral. I say to oil people, introduce yourself as an ethical oil man and start the conversation there. At the worst that'll happen, people will say, what do you mean? Or maybe they'll get it right away. But I think one of the problems, Alex, is that people in our era grow up indoors and they think, well, power comes from the plug in the wall and this phone comes from the store. They don't think about, well, where do these elements come from and where does the coal come that burns in the power plant? And I don't think people realize that sometimes you have to break the earth open to get the good stuff out. You close the earth back up when you're done. But I think people are so disconnected from primary industries, they think we just sit around in Starbucks texting each other Instagrams all day. Like I think people don't realize what industry's like.
But I think that's the important of the idea of the challenge narrative, saying, look, we have this completely unprecedented world. Let's understand what makes it up, what makes it possible. And if it's told the right way, it's really a fascinating thing. Someone wonders, how is it that there's so much food, that there's, we were supposed to run out of food, and now there's enough food for almost 7 billion people. What made that happen? And if they understand, hey, we figured out how to get machines to do all our work for us, and to do that, then machines needed food, and the best form of food for machines is this thing called oil, which this brilliant industry figured out how to get, 1 trillion barrels of, and then transform it into this machine food. This stuff, it becomes pretty fascinating to people.
Well, Alex, I'm glad you're out there fighting and those basic arguments, those building block arguments. I wish I was going to be there in Calgary tomorrow for your speech at CAP, but hopefully you'll come back on the show and tell us how it went.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And again, everyone, industrialprogress.com, sign up for our newsletter and learn about the amazing world of progress.
Right on. Thanks, my friend.